Hello, my name is Skylit Lake, reading Super Science by That Chicken Dude. Chapter 9, Experimentation Log. Subject, Plants. This is Dr. Izuku Midoriya reporting from the Neo Icon Phoenix Research Lab, or NIP for short, performing and recording our first experimentation on the singularity soul and the effects of its radiation. The first subjects I will be using for this experiment are different kinds of plant life. My previous attempts at this experiment back in Professor Egon Kristallos' home were less than ideal. Allow me to explain. Since we do not have the proper technology or facilities that would amicably be used in cases of some sort of emergency in which a plant became too dangerous, the professor had strictly forbidden me from doing multiple experiments on those of much larger plants. Instead, he had me do it on smaller things such as flowers. Unfortunately, after a time of being subjected to the singularity soul's radiation for long periods, even in the most compatible conditions, they would all die within days to hours. The longest living species I had was a bonsai tree that only lived for about a week after prolonged exposure. Hopefully, in the future, I will be able to adjust the radiation from the crystals so small plants may be able to survive and show some sign of change. In saying that, we now have more resources and facilities needed to combat any sort of unforeseen hiccups. Anyway, the first batch of plants I've been using are as followed: 1 American cherry tree sapling, 1 crawling ivy sprout, 1 pumpkin seedling, and 1 adult American pitcher plant. Note: Professor Egon told me not to use Venus flytraps since it might, in his words, make an Audrey chew. After planting all plants into the facility's newly constructed greenhouse, I planted 1 empty soul splinter into the soil so the energy may be absorbed in both roots and air. I had the plants on an automatic water and light timer for maximum production, and consistent readings for all plants in the controlled environment. I will report back when any changes are made. This is Dr. Izuku Midoriya reporting to say, that didn't take long at all. I've only been gone for about 3 days and results have already been made. Massive ones. All the plants I've used in the experiment have all grown to their adult size, which explains why all the flowers I used to die so quickly. The energy didn't kill it, it aged it to the point where it died of old age. I must note this down for future use. Anyhow, as expected, not only had the plants grown in size, but changed on a biological level. First, the American cherry tree. In addition to growing to the size of the adult tree of its genus, it also changed color. Its leaves turned blue, its flowers a bright red, and its fruit a bright white. After a bit of testing, I found that the cherry fruit will explode like firecrackers upon being broken. However, if frozen for 20 minutes, the fruits turn a cool pink and become edible for human consumption. Note, they have a tart taste to them. Next is the crawling ivy. It too grew so massive and quickly that it reached out of its pots and up toward to the glass roof. When I attempted to cut them back, several vines wrapped around me and began to tickle me relentlessly. After freeing myself, I took a leaf sample and saw that it was covered in a toxin response to the tickle response in our skin, using it as a defense mechanism. Note: use fire at a distance. Then we have the pumpkin. Unlike the regular ones, which simply grow a few pumpkins on one vine, this one grew several dozen tiny ones on a single vine and from a single flower. After some analysis, I found that not only were the new mini pumpkins the size of cherry tomatoes, they tasted very sweet. In addition, when touched, they emit a faint purple glow. After a round of different tests, I discovered that when broken, from the vine and blown into the stem, the pumpkins will begin to inflate like balloons. And, contrary to what I thought, no matter if the gourd is broken, bruised or cut, it will not deflate. It'll keep its size and it continues to swell up from more air pressure as long as its stem is intact. I even put it through a high-powered air pressure pump and made it swell up to 14 inches in diameter. I would have let it go longer, but I theorized it may not have a size limit. Note, this could help the worldwide hunger crisis. And finally, the American pitcher plant. Boy, did this one change. Not only did it asexually reproduce, but grew far bigger than any other currently known pitcher plant species. In addition, it gained several large back leaves and a new set of vibrant colors on said leaves and its body. Its innards make us very sweet and insisting aromatic that even I was drawn to. When I got within 30 feet of the plants, they began to rustle and bristle their leaves. As they did so, the waving and vibrating colors began to induce a sort of hypnotic effect, and with the sweet smell dampening my senses, I began to walk toward it. Luckily, I managed to break out just in time, though even if I had gotten too close to the plant, they were still far too small for me to fit in, and couldn't move any other part. Note, I am really glad I listened to Professor's No Venus flytrap rule. From this start alone, I have now several working theories on what may happen. I will attempt one more mass test and see what happens from there. I'll update again when I have started the process. This is Dr. Izuku reporting again on the next round of experiments. So, a day has passed and I've set up the next round of experiments. This time I used a corn seed, a potato sprout, a garlic clove, a carrot seed, and 2 types of cactus trimmings. More specifically, a golden barrel and saguaro. I'll report back when the results have been made. This is Dr. Izuku Midoriya reporting once more to bring an update on the new rounds of plants and their effects on the Singularity Soul's radiation. And, like last time, it came quickly. I'll start in the order I've listed in my last report. First, the corn. Like all the others, it grew full maturity in just few days, and surprisingly sprouted the same amount of ears it normally does. However, when I opened one of them, the corn kernels were coloured and reflective like glass. When brought up to sunlight, they reflected it very similarly to how magnifying glass would, and I had to quickly cover it up before it shot rays of the deadly sunlight at me. In addition, I found that when dropped, whether in or out of the leaves, the corn kernels would explode and scatter like hand-thrown grenades. Note, attempts at making popcorn are now prohibited. Then, the potato. I was surprised to see that it was one of the few that didn't change externally. I had wondered what it could do until I placed one of my phone next to it, and it began to charge from the wireless function. After a bit of testing, I found out that the natural electric charge had been amped up tenfold, and now it was like an industrial battery, no matter its size. Note, food made with it has an electric taste to it. Next, the garlic. When I pulled it out, I almost thought it wasn't ripe because it was green. Then I found out it was, when I accidentally ripped off the stem, and it quickly changed from green to yellow, then orange, and finally red. I figured out what was going on after yellow and threw it. After it hit red, it exploded into a gas compound that irritates the throat when inhaled and smells bad. Luckily, I was close to the airflow controls before it could hit me. Note, I'm guessing onions would be the same, but with tear gas instead. Now, the carrot. It's gold. That's it, it's gold. But it's edible and can be eaten raw. Surprisingly, it acts like a revitalizer in the video game. I was at my 5th cup of coffee when I ate one and I felt all my exhaustion disappear. Note, don't try to trade it in for money. And finally, we get the two cacti. The golden barrel has turned black with pink flowers, and the saguaro now has skin that seems to be some sort of natural metal. The golden barrel can shoot its spines when disturbed. It then turns golden and regrows all its spines before turning back again. If it's disturbed while trying to regrow its missing spines, it'll spray a nasal irritant from any flower it has that causes uncontrollable sneezing fits. As for the saguaro, it has grown twice the size of its normal kind and even wider. It has lost all its spines and now turned a metallic grey. It's made of metal. When testing it has the same strength as both military and construction grade metal. In addition, when a piece of cactus was removed, it quickly regenerated the missing piece. However, removing a piece is the hard part, as I had to cut it with a cutting torch. Note: don't drink the water inside. Upon careful study of what I've seen and made, now my theories happen to be right. The radiation of the singularity soul causes these plants to develop quirks. It's rare in animals, but in plants it's unheard of. Anyhow, this is unheard of, this is massive, and this could change everything we know about the world and science in general. So does that mean our evolution and the emergence of quirks was all thanks to radiation? If so, it couldn't have been from a single species. There must have been more. A huge vein somewhere. We'll have to figure that out on a later date. When I gave my findings to Egon, I expected him to be excited, but not go into cardiac arrest from the shock. It was a fun day from the paramedics. Anyhow, I'll be taking a break from the plant-based tests and moving on to the animal tests to truly see what the radiation can accomplish. If it can cause evolution of quirks, I have to find out how. I will find out how. This is Dr. Izuku Midoriya signing off for now. Chapter 10. Experimentation Log. Subject: Animals. This is Dr. Izuku Midoriya reporting on the newest singularity soul experiment at the NIP research facility. To recap from my last round of tests, in short, I subjected several different plants in the same controlled environment to radiation given off by crystals through empty splinter. In short, I found out that the radiation caused rapid aging and the appearance of quirks, which is a world-shattering piece of information on its own. Anyhow, my next target is to see whether the same thing happens in animals. The reason I test this and not just conclude it, despite the existence of several animals with quirks, is the fact of what happened to the first time I tried it. In short, I used an empty splinter, a different one, on a pigeon that turned into a dodo. Was that the quirk, or did evolution take hold? That's why I'm testing it. On a side note, the one dodo that I showed to Professor Egon has hence been adopted by us and made the honorary facility mascot and pet. We call him Pete. Continuing with my experiments, I have since marked off a few testing rooms and chambers in the animals testing area to accomplish this. Now, I know what you're thinking, but don't worry, we make sure that all the creatures used are not tortured in any way. They live no different lives from house pets. Having said that, I decided to start small and used an order male ant farm. After some words of Professor Egon, he convinced me to do it behind a sealed chamber door lined with thick metal, on the chance they did turn into giant monster ants. With that, I set the splinters beside them and waited. Luckily, I didn't have to wait long, since they all died a few hours later. I can only guess that, like the flowers and their ages, they are unable to withstand the radiation and overage to death. I'll have to use something a bit bigger, so for the next experiment I've decided to use two different subjects, a common pet store goldfish and a koi fish. Both subjects were placed in the same divided aquarium with the splinter in the vicinity. I will report once any changes have been made. This is Dr. Izuku Midoriya reporting again. The results have finally been made, the two fish after just 3 days. In short, the pet store goldfish is dead, unsurprisingly, and the koi fish now shimmers when exposed to direct sunlight. Note, these could make good decorations at the entryway for the research facility. From this, I can only conclude that the effects of the radiation are entirely dependent on the size of the creature and not what kind of creature it is. The next round of experiments will be subjected to amphibians and birds. I'll report back as soon as I have everything set up. Okay, I finally managed to get my hands on all necessary animals needed for this test. This time I am using two vastly different kinds of animals, all of varying sizes, amphibians and birds. For amphibians, I am using an axolotl, a giant salamander, and a newt. As for the birds, I am once again using the wild pigeons around Japan, a chicken, a budgie, and a peacock. In addition, I'll be also testing an octopus that was accidentally sent alongside the 3 amphibians. Once again, I have put all the animals in different testing chambers in all the same controlled environments. The amphibians were allowed in the same tank but divided, all except the octopus, who was put in a completely separate tank. I have placed an empty splinter within their vicinity. The birds were all placed in different enclosures in the same testing chamber, divided off for their safety. An empty splinter was placed within their vicinity. I'll report back once any signs of changes are seen. This is Dr. Izuku Midori reporting some amazing news about the most recent experiments. I don't even know where to start or even how to put this reporting down into any coherence, but first, I'll just start with how most of the experiments went before I get into the amazing discovery. I periodically checked on all these creatures once every day. No signs has been made until on the 2nd and 4th day respectively. First, I'll be starting with the amphibians and the octopus. The axolotl has gained the ability to control water and can move freely from its tanks. It's a good thing I checked in on it periodically because I think the radiation was starting to get to it and it was using its newfound quirk to move away from the splinter. Note, make a covered and watertight tank. Then, the giant salamander, surprisingly, has shown no signs of quirk. I'm not sure if it's simply immune to the effects of the radiation, or if some creatures, like humans, cannot develop quirks, or if it's simply evolutionarily perfect. Either way, it remains the same no matter how much time passes. Note, it's sort of nice to know that some creatures can be quirkless. Next, the newt. It's dead. Surprisingly, however, this isn't due to radiation from the splinter. It was actually due to its own developed quirk. I'm not sure what it was, but it just exploded. Note, study remains to see what happened. Last of all, the octopus, it showed no physical signs except for its brain. The radiation has caused its brain, which normally wraps around its esophagus, to disconnect and become separate in the body, allowing it to swell up to 3 times its normal capacity. This also includes many more wrinkles in the brain. In short, it got smarter. A lot smarter. So smart that it has now a minor form of sentience and sapience. The way I found this out is when it asked me in Morse code to give back the crystal so it could continue growing. I am both extremely intrigued and extremely scared of what that could mean. For now, I denied its request and placed it into a new aquarium to be studied. Note, learn Morse code. After this are the birds. First, the peacock. Somehow the whole "it hypnotizes with its tail" false fact had came true. When raising and shaking its tail feathers, it induces a slight hypnotic effect so long as eye contact is met consistently. I was fortunate enough that it dropped its tail and ran away as I approached. Note, make hypnotic proof goggles. Then the budgie. It didn't change externally like the peacock, but instead its vocals did. The bird can now mimic any sound it heard perfectly, and at the decimals it was at. Apart from speech, I've tested gunshots, car keys, bells, the bark of a dog, the grunts of Pete, the flicking of a light switch, the buzz of electricity, and the honk of a tuba. I even gave it a rendition of one of Mozart's symphonies, and it copied it perfectly with all the instruments present. My one mistake was allowing it to hear my ringtone, and now it pranks me by making the same noise. I've come to find out its intelligence has grown to that of an American grey parrot. Note: change ringtones. Next, the chicken. It's by far the strangest one yet. Its brain has quadrupled in size. It's so large that it stretches the fins on its head to the point it's nearly translucent. I honestly wonder how it's still able to stand and walk, let alone still be alive. I'm honestly still wondering what happened to its skull if it still has it. As I'm sure you can guess, in addition to having one of the largest brain-to-body sizes in the history of its species and every animal on Earth, it has an equally numerous amount of wrinkles in its brain. This is as smart, if not smarter than most people. Note: she has been able to speak with me through a text-to-speech generator and has formally asked for a job. Last of all is the pigeon. I was most surprised by this, since it didn't change into a dodo as I expected. It only gains a quirk similar to that one of the hero hawks. It can shoot, control, reattach its feathers in addition to being able to give off a faint white glow. I'm honestly baffled by this one, so I'll do some more experimenting to see what happens from there. Note: don't let any religious fanatics see it. This is Dr. Izuku. Oh, forget it. This is too important for formalities. I've made a great breakthrough since my last report. I've truly underestimated the power of the Singularity Soul. It's more powerful than I could have imagined. Maybe I should stop gushing and get to the point. Finding that a pigeon was given a quirk instead of being turned into a pigeon made me wonder about something. What did I do differently that caused it to change so drastically? So after a bit, I figured it out, and decided to run the same pigeon test, this time with 2 different empty splinters. The first one was the splinter I used to test the plants and animals, and the second one was the one I originally used to turn the pigeon into dodos for money. I placed both in the vicinity of 2 pigeons in different testing chambers, and after a few days, the same thing happened. One changed into a dodo, and the other gained the same quirk as the first test subject. This led me to 2 different discoveries, the first being that any creature or plant of the same type, except for humans, will always have the same quirk. The second thing is, the energy fluctuations in the splinter causes different effects. The way I found this out was by taking the splinters and running them under an energy wave reader. I found out that the quirk splinter was positively charged while the evolution splinter was negatively charged, so depending on what frequency it's at and how much it was put into the splinter, effect I found out later depends on what effect it gives us. I wonder if that also translates to whatever the splinter absorbs. Maybe I can even control the frequency of the energy to see what other effects they have. Different experiments for different days. So I tested this once more and used 2 female sheep. I kept them in separate testing chambers with the same controlled environment and both splinters in each room. I'll report back on my findings. Okay, the tests are a full success and have brought up another important piece of information on the radiation effects. These are my full findings on each subject. The sheep that had a quirk splinter did develop a quirk, some form of electrokinesis. It can generate electricity through its wool to do several things. It can release the pent-up energy at will, use it to increase its speed, create a force field, and electricity-charged ions in the air allow it to float and airwalk. It's also gained a taste for sugar and tobacco, not sure why. When sheared and processed into clothes, it had a very tingly feeling to it. When its meat is cooked and eaten, it has the same effect as the clothes, with no abnormal signs. But it's perfectly safe. Note: many of them could cause thunderstorms or power a small town. The sheep that had the evolution splinter did something unexpected. Instead of devolving into another less evolved species of sheep, like a wild one, it instead evolved. Instead of a wild sheep, before humans domesticated them, there stood a much larger, leaner, smarter, more muscular sheep. I almost thought it was a wolf, or I had gone into the wrong room, but it was the same one. Its legs grew longer with a bigger chest and a body structure like a predator. Its wool was like regular hair. Its eyes gingerly moved somewhat to the front of its face. Its hooves split into 3 toe-like claws. Its horns now grew up before curving and shooting straight out. After briefly observing it, I almost assumed it turned into a carnivore, but after feeding, I found it still be a herbivore. When approached, it acted much more aggressively than normal sheep that would act curious or scared. When the foal was sheared, it acted like hare and came off piece by piece. When the meat was eaten, it was extremely tough and gamey. Note, it reminds me of the old anime my mum and I watched as a kid. I was truly baffled as to how and why this happened, and then I found the reason. When I gave both sheep a physical exam, I discovered they are both under a lot of stress. I guess the move from an open field to an enclosed lab, coupled with the lack of noise and social interactions between their kind, said it just skyrocket. That's when I realized what the radiation had done. Due to stress, the radiation caused it to evolve to something that could handle stress more easily in a predator-heavy environment. That's why it looks and acts more aggressively and like a predator. So any external force could cause major changes in the subject's change. That's why the pigeon turned into dodo. They are so calm and in a predator-free and food-rich environment that they devolved into something more suitable for such a lifestyle. I can only guess what else it could do. Okay, I have a bit of a dilemma here, or situation. While I was testing and observing the sheep, the semi-intelligent octopus snuck out of its aquarium and stole the quirk splinter. When I finally found where it was when it was feeding time, I had to act fast, but the fastest I could go was 2 hours, since it took me 2 hours to get him out of his tanks and then another hour to pry it out his tentacles. Who knows how long he had it. Luckily, he didn't turn into a giant monster octopus like I thought. He just grew smarter, way smarter. The way I found this out was when I came in the next day. He was sitting at my desk in a glass bowl filled with water and typing at my computer with a text-to-speech. Does he want to work for the facility? I'm not sure why, but I didn't deny him that. I'll have to set something up with him, the chicken, and the professor. He can understand human speech, just can't speak it. Much like the chicken. I guess they'll be my future co-workers. This is Dr. Izuku Midoriya signing off for now. Note, they both have given themselves names. The chicken has called herself Dr. Cluck Orpington, and the octopus has called himself Professor Octocephalopod. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I got a new mic, so the sound quality is much better. Just now you can hear me stuttering a lot more. Hopefully I cover it up in my editing. And my dry mouth or very wet mouth, depends. Changes a lot during the recording process. Anyway, I'm loving the new change of pace in the story, and I hope you enjoy these stories as well. Bye!